Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most challenging ideas in Western thought, the concept of eternal hell. But we're not just going to look at theology. Instead, we're going on a linguistic and historical detective mission. We're going to see how a few ancient words, maybe misunderstood over time, could have shaped a concept the original authors never even intended. Now, this verse, Matthew 25:46, is a big one. For many, it's the bedrock for the idea of an eternal hell. And that word, eternal, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? It means forever, without end, case closed. Or is it? And that question, that's the key that unlocks this whole investigation. To get to the bottom of it, we have to go back, way back, before centuries of art and literature and philosophy colored our view. We need to try and hear these words the way the original audience would have. So let's dive in. Okay, so where do we even start? We're going to begin in the Old Testament by looking at the key Hebrew word that gets translated as forever or eternal. You'll see why in a second, but its original meaning really sets the stage for everything that comes later in the New Testament. So this is fascinating. Unlike our kind of abstract idea of infinite, endless time, the Hebrew word olam was way more concrete. It comes from a root word that means hidden. So think of it like the horizon. You know it ends somewhere, but from where you're standing, that end is concealed. It's out of sight. It refers to an age, a specific period, not necessarily infinity. And the best part? We don't have to guess. The Bible itself gives us a masterclass in how to use this word. So get this. The Bible basically defines olam for us right in the text. Jonah says he was in the fish forever. How long was that? 3 days and 3 nights. A bondservant was to serve his master forever. When did that end? When he died. Samuel was dedicated to the temple forever, which meant for his entire life. See the pattern? In every single case, olam describes a specific, limited period of time. It's the context that tells you how long the age is, not some abstract rule. Okay, let's move on to the next major piece of the puzzle. This one is huge. It's the powerful and, frankly, terrifying image of unquenchable fire. I mean, this phrase, maybe more than any other, has really built our modern picture of hell. And the difference between how we see it and how they saw it is massive. Our modern view, think Dante's Inferno, is of a fire that somehow preserves things while tormenting them forever. But the ancient Hebrew view, it was the complete opposite. It described a fire so powerful, so irresistible, that nothing could stop it until it had totally and utterly consumed everything in its path. It wasn't about preserving something forever, it was about destroying it completely. So this term, lo tikbeh, it wasn't about some supernatural, otherworldly thing. The prophets used it as an idiom to describe very real-world events, like a foreign army invading. They were talking about things that happened right here on Earth. And the coolest part? We can actually prove it with hard evidence from history and archaeology. Right here, the prophet Jeremiah delivers this message from God to Jerusalem. It's a warning. If you break the covenant, an unquenchable fire is coming for your gates. This wasn't some abstract threat. It was a literal prophecy about a specific city and a specific consequence. And this is where it gets really compelling. Archaeology confirms that this unquenchable fire was a real historical event. When archaeologists excavate in Jerusalem, they find these thick layers of ash and rubble and charred wood that date directly to the Babylonian invasion in 586 BCE. The prophecy literally came true. But that brings up a really important question. Is that fire still burning today? Of course not. We know from history the fire did its job. It destroyed the city's defenses, and then it went out. It burned itself out. The city was eventually rebuilt. So unquenchable clearly meant unstoppable, not unending. Now let's look at the most dramatic example of this kind of language in the whole Bible. This prophecy against the nation of Edom is one of the most vivid images you'll find. I mean, if we take the word forever literally, the way we use it today, then a piece of what is now modern-day Jordan should be a smoking, burning pit of brimstone, permanently. But is it? This is where the Bible uses its own internal logic to show us what's going on. It's not about an endless fire. It's a powerful metaphor for total and final destruction. And the proof is in the very next lines of the prophecy itself. The Bible itself debunks the idea of a literal eternal fire right here. Just a few verses later, what happens to this burnt land? It becomes a habitat for pelicans, porcupines, jackals, and snakes that are nesting and laying eggs.
You can't have nesting birds in a literal lake of fire. The image is clearly one of total destruction that leads to complete desolation.
So, what's the bottom line here? The forever smoke isn't describing something that's still burning. It's a monument to a destruction that is already finished. The fire was the one-time event. The desolation was the olam, the resulting age of ruin. And historically, that's exactly what happened. The nation of Edom was wiped off the map, permanently. The metaphor was fulfilled perfectly.
Okay, so we've established these big Hebrew ideas. Olam as a finite age and unquenchable fire as a total consuming judgment. So the big question is, how did all of this carry over into the Greek New Testament? After all, the apostles were thinking in Hebrew.
You have to remember, the apostles were thinking like Hebrews, but they were writing in Greek for a wider audience. So they chose the closest Greek words they could find. For olam, they used aionios, which means pertaining to an age. And for unquenchable fire, they used asbestos, a word used to describe the fire on a threshing floor that would burn up the useless chaff instantly and completely. It was a metaphor for a quick, violent, final cleansing. Now, when Jesus talks about hell, a lot of the time he uses this word Gehenna. You have to understand, this wasn't some mythical place. It was a real physical valley right outside Jerusalem, the Valley of Hinnom. It was notorious. First as a place of horrific child sacrifice, and later it was basically the city garbage dump. Fires were always smoldering there, consuming waste and the unburied bodies of criminals. So when Jesus used the word Gehenna, his audience would have immediately pictured total destruction, shame, and finality, not an otherworldly realm of conscious torment.
And that brings us to the most infamous hell passage in the entire Bible, the vision of eternal torment in Revelation 14. But here's the kicker. It's not a new idea. It's a direct quote from Isaiah's prophecy against Edom, the very same one we just looked at. The Apostle John is grabbing a well-known metaphor for the complete and final annihilation of a wicked nation. That smoke rising forever isn't about endless torture. It's a permanent memorial to the fact that evil has been utterly and permanently defeated.
So when you start to put all these pieces together, it does more than just change how you read a few verses. It really starts to reframe the entire nature of divine judgment as it's presented in the Bible.
This verse from Lamentations, it's a total game changer. It was written about the exact destruction of Jerusalem by that unquenchable fire we talked about. And right in the middle of all that devastation, the prophet says that God's judgment, his casting off, is for an olam, a limited age, and that it will be followed by compassion. It suggests that even the most severe judgment from God isn't necessarily the final word.
So let's just quickly recap what we found. The word we translate as forever, olam, really means a finite but hidden age. Unquenchable fire describes a judgment that is totally unstoppable, not one that is unending. The Bible even uses observable reality, history, archaeology, even biology to show us that this is often hyperbolic language for a total final destruction. And the New Testament writers carry these original Hebrew meanings forward. So all of this leaves us with a really big question. If the purpose of God's fire isn't to sustain evil and torment forever, but to completely consume and destroy it, how does that change the way we think about things like justice, compassion, and what an ultimate victory over evil really looks like? That's a question we're thinking about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.